Good day. In today's video, I'll be going over the law of the annexation of Canada from Fallout. Let's begin. Long before the bombs fell in 2077, before the skies burned above Boston and Washington, before the vault doors sealed shut, there was a quieter conquest, one that crept across the northern border under the guise of necessity. By the mid-21st century, the world of Fallout was not the optimistic atomic dream it once was. Oil wells ran dry, nations clawed at each other for the last drops of fossil fuel. The Middle East had burned itself in nuclear fire, and Europe turned into warring states. China, desperate and expanding, eyed the Pacific. This era would become known as the Resource Wars. The United States, still outwardly confident beneath the red-blue-white broderie, was running on fumes. Oil from Alaska's North Slope, once a lifeline, had become the most valuable substance on Earth. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline was no longer just infrastructure, it was survival. In 2066, China finally invaded Alaska. It was a bold move. If China controlled Alaska, it could choke America's oil supply at its source. The United States, seeing this, responded with overwhelming force, deploying newly developed power armor units to take on the Reds. The battle between the two was slow and harsh, but the Americans eventually won. But behind the propaganda of victory lied something far darker. To supply the Alaska front, the United States required to secure transport routes across Canadian territory. Initially, Canada agreed to allow American troops and equipment to pass through. It was a strategic alliance, they said. Strained, but it was functional. At the time, Canada agreed to transport rights, not occupation. As the American military presence increased, so did tensions. Canadian citizens protested the foreign troops marching through their cities and forests. Riots broke out, and even sabotage of American supply lines became more frequent. In the American view, Canada was becoming unreliable, perhaps even sympathetic to the Chinese cause. The United States did not tolerate instability during this time. In 2072, under the justification of securing the Alaska pipeline and protecting continental security, the United States annexed Canada outright. There was no subtle diplomacy left. American troops simply moved in, and Canada's sovereignty evaporated. In the pre-war news footage later found scattered across the wasteland, one particular chilling scene stands out. A powered armor American soldier executes a band of American protesters in the streets. This footage plays without any commentary, without any outrage, just cold inevitability. That moment encapsulates the annexation more than any speech could. The United States did not conquer Canada in a blaze of nuclear fire, it did it in the name of order. Pre-war America in Fallout was a masterclass of denial. Propaganda posters urged citizens to report dissidents. Televisions reassured viewers that victory in Anchorage was inevitable. Resource shortages were framed as patriotic sacrifices. The annexation of Canada was presented not as a conquest of another nation, but as a continental unifier. Unity in a way. Necessary for the survival of democracy, they said. But in truth, things were much darker. The Canadian citizens were treated as occupied subjects. Civil liberties eroded. American corporation interests, particularly those tied to the energy and defense sectors, extended their reach northwards. The annexation strengthened the military-industrial complex that had already dominated the American government. But by this point in Fallout's lore, the line between government and corporation had blurred beyond recognition. Companies like Voltec, Westec, and Poseidon Energies wielded influence rivaling elected officials. The annexation of Canada was not simply strategic, it was profitable. And profit in this world mattered more than principle. With Canada absorbed and the North American continent becoming a fortress, troops patrolled cities, powered armor units stood as symbols of overwhelming force, surveillance expanded, and fear became policy. The annexation had consequences beyond geopolitics. The same mindset that justified occupying Canada would justify the sailing of American citizens in experimental vaults. In my personal eyes, the annexation of Canada was not an isolated event. It was a symptom of a greater disease that was spreading in the world during this time, the loss of democracy and the embracement of totalitarianism. In the year 2077, the United States officially reclaimed Anchorage from Chinese forces. It was hailed as a triumphant victory. Soldiers returned as heroes and parades were bland. But the victory rang hollow. The war effort had drained resources, and China, cornered and desperate, faced collapse. Tensions escalated quickly to unthinkable levels. Both powers stood still, armed with nuclear arsenals large enough to end civilization. And on October 23, 2077, the Great War began. And in less than 2 hours, the world as we know it ended. America was not merely a victim of nuclear annihilation, it was an aggressor shaped by paranoia and scarcity. The annexation represents the final evolution of pre-war America's ideology, a belief that security justifies anything. even the erasure of a whole entire nation. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and like, share, subscribe, and enjoy the rest of your day. Peace.